Welcome to the Mood Disorder Support and Education Group here in North Carolina. I am Cindy Jones. Now we're officially recording. And I would like to introduce my colleague, Michelle Byars. I have known Michelle since 2014. I think that's when I first came to AHB. So we've known each other a good while. Michelle is a person who's been in the clinical field a long time, wearing different hats, but still very dedicated to developmental therapy, to functional neurology, to yoga, to coaching, a lot of areas that cross over with each other. And we first started working together. I was learning about some of the work she was doing with young people, with kids, and what are things that would show up in kids that I might see in families that I was seeing, or wondering about some of the adults that I was seeing, what might be things that could have shown up when they were younger. Like really just originally thinking about what happens with kids is separate from what happens with adults. And I have come to a much bigger awareness now that that is not the case, that it's a continuum. And so we really started collaborating on where these worlds come together, and particularly began to speak about the vestibular system. So I started learning about the vestibular system with Michelle, and I got so excited about the bigger implications for the mental health field that I really wanted her to come on board and us have a conversation and really get everybody up to speed in thinking about this. It is absolutely profound. A lot of times in the medical field, the different disciplines do not communicate with each other. They don't cross-pollinate. And so you have a specialty field, like we did this with autism and with the speech pathology people. Those folks don't usually get engaged. We had Jennifer Minnelli come and talk, and Jennifer Minnelli spoke about speech issues that turns out it's not just people with autism who have speech and communication issues, but all kinds of people in the mood disorders have issues. So it's this kind of thing. And so what Michelle brings today is in that same just profound level, not to like make you feel like you're Superman, Michelle, but so we're going to have a conversation, and I'm just going to gently hand the baton to you if you have some things you want to run out the gate. But we're just going to talk about vestibular system and all kinds of things that relate to that, and mood symptoms. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming today.
Sure. I feel like after that introduction, I should be like, like, how do I follow that? so, yeah, so Cindy and I have been working together now for quite some time. And as she mentioned, I came to work in this psychology office after sort of doing a lot of body work and studying the body, but with a specific purpose. So, just like a quick background about myself, I got involved in this uh, career as a parent because my eldest son, who at the time was my only son, was diagnosed in the autism spectrum. And he's now 25. So, if you go back many
Wait, I know I muted you. Wait, I didn't mean to mute you. Can you unmute yourself, Michelle? You're supposed to be my co-host. Pardon me. Here we go. Wait, ask to unmute. Sorry. Okay, little temporary gap there. Now can you do it? You should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
got it. Okay.
We were speaking about your family and how directly it
Okay.
impacts you.
So yeah, so my son was diagnosed in the autism spectrum, and at the time, 20 years ago, there wasn't a lot of information out there, and I was told that he was just this way, he would always be this way, and that just accept him for who he was. And I was totally on board for accepting him for who he was. I was totally on board with accepting that he might always have these challenges, but I'm also a why girl. So I was like, but you don't know why he's regressed, because he regressed. You don't know where it's happening in the brain. You don't know what affected it and what could change it in the future. So how do I know that this is how he's always going to be? Challenge accepted. And so that put me on a path of learning as much as I could about what was going on with him. And along the way, I stumbled onto some things that pushed me into this realm. So one of the things I stumbled on was that I noticed whenever he had a developmental milestone, improvements in his emotional responses and his cognitive responses. So, for example, when he learned how to ride a bike, then I noticed he was more regulated when he got frustrated. And I thought, that's really cool. Why? And so I did a bunch of research and deep dived. And then I was teaching yoga. I went and I became a certified yoga instructor and worked specifically with children and adults with developmental delays. And again, this was like 20 years ago. And I had people within my yoga classes who were improving. And I would say, cool. And I was a skeptic. Like, I had a parent come to me, and her son was on the autism spectrum, and she's like, he's doing better with speech, he's doing better with communication, his social engagement's improved. I was like, that's really cool. What else are you doing? And she's like, nothing. We've just been doing this. And I'm like, okay. And that was amazing. And I loved it. And I was really happy for them. But if I didn't know why, I couldn't repeat it, couldn't tell what was going on. And so working in an OT office and working with them for a couple of years, co-teaching camps to their kids. I worked as a movement coach in a functional neurology program, and that tipped me off to, okay, there's so much more going on here. And I went and did graduate work in functional neurology to understand developmental disorders, and I did developmental movement training. And then with all of that background, I started to have a better understanding of what was going on. Of course, it's a huge subject, but I have some idea of what to look for and how to make some changes. And so with that all in mind, I went and worked at AHB, which was wonderful, because not only then did I get to work with people in tandem. So, and I really believe in this tandem approach. If you want to change the system, you need a systematic approach, and that includes the body and the mind. So I love that. I've seen so much improvement in the clients that I work with that way. But it also gave me some insight into the psychology world, because I also did psychoeducational testing while I was there. I was also on case consultations with everyone. And my question, always in the back of my mind when we're talking about things like anxiety or depression or bipolar or schizophrenia or any of those things, I'd always be thinking, yeah, what's going on with their body? Because the body matters. And what I have found, which is typical across different disciplines, is that there's not a lot of crosstalk to each other, right? And so there are things that contribute that I have found over the last 20 years of working with children and working with adults. There are things that show up in people's systems that contribute to things that show up in their mind and in their nervous system. So there are many things that I look at, but one of the thing that Cindy really wanted me to talk about today is the vestibular system. And this is one of those things that shows up over and over. And let me just step back a second too and just say, why it matters, right? Let's give you the analogy of a car. Okay, your body and your brain, the organ that is your brain, is your car. And you are inside it, and that's your nervous system, and your thoughts are inside driving the car around. Okay? If the car itself has a flat tire or the engine's not working right and it's causing your car to sway all over the place, you're going to have a stress response and you're going to start thinking certain things, right? Or if your car is dragging and it's not picking up speed, you're going to have a nervous system response and you're going to start to get worried and anxious, depressed, whatever, right? If the car is not functioning, it impacts, and the car is our body and brain, our structural brain, it impacts our nervous system and our thoughts because they are all one thing. They are all one system. And our body and our brain is what everything foundationally is built on. First, you get that, then you get emotional responses, then you get thought. So if the foundation is wonky, it's going to show up in your emotional nervous system responses and in your thought processes. And you can, and I appreciate things like if somebody has anxiety, I appreciate CBT, or mindfulness. These are very, very helpful and they make sense as part of a plan. But if you have a broken leg, you can think all you want, it's not fixing your leg, right? So if there's something in your system that's not functioning optimally and it's impacting how you feel and how you perceive the surroundings, because this is how we perceive through our sensory motor system, it's all we got. There's something not functioning there properly, then that should be addressed because it's not going to be fixed. It's not going to be improved just by thinking better or breathing, right? And so that's what I'm looking at when I'm looking at people's systems. Is there something showing up? And I don't know. When people come in, I'm always curious. Maybe there isn't, and then there's another reason for it. But 99% of the time, there is something there that is contributing to the emotional, cognitive distress that that person is in. And so I want to improve that piece so that that can have a positive impact on the higher up things that they're experiencing. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions before I go?
If you have any questions, put them in the chat, and we'll get to them. And this would be really great if it was an interactive exchange. I mean, this is a new concept paradigm. So, unless you're in the medical field, most people aren't really looking at what does developmental theory mean? What does it mean, milestones? What does that mean? Right? So, how would that impact my mood? And for me, in what Michelle has done with me, is looking at a particular symptom that I have had for as long as I can remember, but I thought that that was just what everybody had. So now we're looking. I carry a dizziness with me, a vertigo experience with me. I've had it for as long as I can remember. I attributed it to a couple of events in my life, but I thought that's what it is. It's not going to, it is what it is. Certainly my medical team has seen my history, and I have complained about this before. But when Michelle and I were talking about my experience, she was able to show me that this particular experience of mine, of feeling dizzy, of feeling off balance, that actually makes me rev a little bit. There's a part of my nervous system that's almost like tabs open on a computer. So there's a part of me that's ever bracing for that, which means I'm probably going to be a little extra fatigued. It does affect my sleep. It affects my ability to remember things, to concentrate, to learn. It's like, oh, wow. that didn't really have to be that hard. I didn't have to really work this hard. So we've already done a couple of little things, just little things, to teach my body that it doesn't have to hold so tight. I'm telling you what, it is good. I'm not taking any new medications. And we've seen this with other clients that I have referred to her, right? Where it's just little things. It's just like when you're in physical therapy or taking yoga or you're getting a massage and somebody just does that one little place and your whole body goes, oh God, thank you. You know, well, think about the nervous system like that, right? It's, you know, I should have had a V8, like kind of like what? You know?
Well, I think we are taught to separate things. I think that that's just how we're taught. We're taught that our thoughts are somehow housed in something that's separate from the entire system and how we're functioning, right? Even though we can say stuff like, oh, well, I know if I don't eat, I get hangry. No. Okay, well, if I'm not eating, I can have an emotional response, right? Or we know that if I fall over, if I start to fall over, I'm not gonna be like, oh look, I'm falling over. Oh. You're gonna go, oh, right, and have an emotional response and a stress response, right? We know that that makes a difference. We know that there are different moods and different cycles we get in that affect our mood and also our cognition, right? Um, so, but for some reason, everything else gets sort of like shuffled aside to this other realm, but this other realm doesn't exist. There is no other realm. So it's our system, and our thoughts are a byproduct of our system. That's what they are. And the nice thing about being a human is that we are self aware. And so we can become aware of those thoughts. And that's where mindfulness makes such a huge difference, is that you can start to become aware of them and then decide if they make sense or not. But the thoughts themselves are just are a byproduct of what we are experiencing. We only experience through this system. So one of the things that Cindy was talking about, one of the areas that shows up that is often um, not working the best is this vestibular system, which is, people know it as your balance system, right? Um, but like every system, it's not just about balance, it's about emotion and cognition as well. And it's first system that comes online. Do you see that, Cindy? That somebody's waiting to come in? Okay. It's our first system that comes online in utero. It starts to it's an organizer for other systems. So it helps organize visual information and auditory processing, and it helps organize with different receptors in your body to know where your head is in relationship with your body and where your body is in space. That's sort of the basics of what it does, but it's also tied into your nervous system. It also, when there's dysregulation or if there are glitches in your vestibular system, they can show up in a whole bunch of ways. So, and they're on a spectrum of like minimal to maximum, right? They can, if your balance system is constantly being tripped up and you aren't aware of it, and oftentimes people are not aware the balance system is not functioning properly because we have a whole bunch of compensatory behaviors and things that we do. For example, there's someone that I work with who gave me permission to mention this stuff, that she's super tight in her neck and her shoulders, so tight. Well, she has a really difficult time with balance, and it shows up in the way that her eyes move. She has a difficult time separating her eyes from her head, and she has a very difficult time if she moves herself around too much, she starts to fall. Realize how bad it was. because this is so tight that whenever she moves, like her whole body is moving like this. And that's a compensatory behavior, a compensatory result that's happening in her system to keep her head still so that she doesn't have to fall out of balance every second when she's moving, right? Balance is one thing. But the other piece of this is that anytime you're off balance, it trips your nervous system, right? We have a sympathetic nervous system response when we are out of balance or we get disoriented, right? Because that's something else the system does is it orients you in space. And so if your balance system is off a little bit, even a little bit, but consistently a little bit, and what happens is you're in a higher state of arousal. You're in a higher state of anxiousness. Even if you don't know it, your body is doing that. And we only have so much energy every single day, right? There's a finite amount. It isn't an unlimited source. And if your body, so say you have this much energy, if your body is taking up this much of that energy because it has to focus on keeping your head upright and wondering where you are, and oh my gosh, I'm stressed out. Let's be careful of where we're going. And like constantly having to deal with that, you get this much for everything else that you're doing. Talking to people, remembering things, figuring out what's going on, where you are in space, organizing and sequencing. So there are a lot of the, we have science that shows, we have studies that show what the sort of side effects or symptoms of an off vestibular system are, and they're everything from stress, anxiety, poor balance, of course, motion sickness, of course, but also rigidity, having to have things be a certain way, right? Your system doesn't want to get tripped. It becomes very conscious about like making sure you're doing specific things in a specific way because it doesn't know when it's going to get thrown off. Poor attention, cognitive, because you have cognitive fatigue. There's poor attention and poor memory. There's also poor hand-eye coordination, obviously, anxiousness, depression, and also vestibular has a component that has to do with social awareness and understanding yourself and others and being able to mirror that. So it matters, right? That's the point. Like these systems matter. So if there's something happening upstream, looking downstream to figure out what's going on here and then working on that through the way that we always work on our body is through our body and through specific movements to help improve that functioning can really make changes upstream. So, questions? Make sense?
Yeah,
Does it make sense?
I
Too
want
sciencey? I try to like.
I want to keep coming back to the part where it doesn't take much to set it off, because the article that I sent and shared with everybody, it's a little bit dense, from the Science Magazine article, but it covers some very straightforward findings. And what it highlights is that the client may not even know that their nervous system is being tripped up. And I am here to tell you that's my experience. I did not even know. But when we started looking and screening for the littlest things, just things that I'm not a developmental person. I don't know what are some of the, physical reactions that are on target or are hyper responsive. I don't know that. So Michelle's looking at me going, wow, you really have quite a startle response there with that. I'm like, really? Because I don't see it. She's like, yeah. So I worked with another client in the room since I'm still learning about this, and that client experienced like a place where they could not get their body to release, even though we gave permission, go ahead and release. They could not do it, and they said, I don't know why I can't do that. And it was because they were having a physical response that was part of their defense mechanism. It was like a freeze. And they knew they didn't have to stay frozen because it was safe, but they couldn't unengage that. And so think about the micro parts about this, which is why I'm so excited, because the interventions, the things that can make a difference, they don't have to be big. Little things can make a difference in terms of helping with eye tracking and helping the body relax and know that it doesn't have to operate in this sort of like mode. I have a client I'm working with who has issues with headache, neck ache, and severe jaw pain. And when that client went and worked with a neck specialist, realizing that there was a gripping that was occurring, and the minor adjustments of getting the jaw to learn that it doesn't have to clench like that, huge difference. So these are things that we can be doing for ourselves.
Well, and I think the other part of it that really I appreciate is that oftentimes I have noticed that there is a blaming of self for certain things. So, for example, if you're anxious, right? Well, I'm just anxious and I shouldn't be anxious. And I just have to think myself out of being anxious. And if I can just, if I'm still anxious, then I'm not thinking right. Or why can't I think myself out of this, right? Well, if your system's not functioning properly and it's tripping your sympathetic nervous system, tripping into anxiousness, that has nothing to do with nothing to do with you. That has to do with the way that your body is set up. And just like if you have weak muscles in a particular area and you can't pick something up because your muscles are weak, you don't go, well, I'm a terrible person because I can't pick that up. You go, oh, my muscles are weak. Let me work on that, right? And it allows, once there's an understanding of this is what my system is doing, there's an opportunity to separate from the experience as being you. And somehow you 100% responsible for that experience. Like, like that matters. So that I'll share with you. So like this is personal, but I had a medical incident last year that was pretty intense. I had a pulmonary embolism, a saddle PE, and almost died. And, as since that time, I have had some sort of a PTSD response around medical interventions. Okay, and this can be big or small. If I don't know what's going to happen, I have a stress response. So I was off at the one of the multiple doctor's appointments that I've had to do this last year, and as a result of all of this, the other day, and it's an eye exam. And I was like, okay, eye exam, I'm fine. And then they put drops in my eyes, and then they did a pressure test, and they pushed something against my eyeball. And my body was like, like stress response, right? And I started to like cry, not like sobbing, but I had tears coming out and stuff. And I was able to say to the woman, I am fine. This is a stress response in my body. It was, and I didn't like feel embarrassed about it. I didn't feel like I should be able to muscle through it. I didn't like, oh, there's something wrong with me that I can't do this. I completely recognized my body is having a stress response because it hasn't yet resolved all of the stuff that happened. It didn't get to like release all of that stress when I was there. And so now it's coming out like when these things get triggered. But but it wasn't me. And I could say that to her. I am fine. I know everything you're doing is not a thing. Like I'm good. And I was able to treat my body with some compassion and also not take on any additional guilt or shame about what was going on. I wasn't in control of it. It was happening. And it's okay. Like that, it thinks it's trying to be safe. We're just going to let it do that thing. And then when I was done with that, I was very um, thoughtful about then giving myself some downtime, eating some food that helped my body feel better, going into a quiet place, having a cup of tea, all of these things that I knew were going to calm my nervous system down without having to take on any additional drama or create drama in my head about myself. I didn't have to gaslight myself because it didn't have anything to do with me. And I think that is huge. I think understanding that our bodies have their responses and that we're kind of along for the ride in a lot of ways. Anybody who's ever had a kid knows this, right? When you're pregnant, who knows what's happening? Like stuff happens. You're like, oh, this is happening now? Okay, like you are along for the ride. But the truth is, that's how our bodies work. We are mostly along for the ride. And so being able to understand and get some perspective on that really matters in terms of decreasing additional anxiety, decreasing your own negative self thoughts, improving your own self confidence because this is not me, this is my body, and here's what I can do to help take care of it. It gives you some um, uh, control, right, in a different way. And I think even that matters a ton, you know? That's one of the things that, Cindy, if I could share, that we were talking about, or another client that I've been working who's said, she's been able to create some separation. So when she's having a stress response, she's like, oh, wait, I already know my body's working really hard because I had to do these things. I had to drive 6 hours. My system's already going to be fatigued, even if I'm not aware of it up here yet. And so I need to make sure that I take care of myself. And when she started to feel stressed out, she was like, but wait a minute, I did all of these things today, and I know that's tripping my nervous system because my body is not functioning properly in these ways. Oh, let me just go take care of myself. Let me give myself permission to separate from all of these people because that's too much information, too much extra for my nervous system, which is already high, and go take care of my nervous system. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
That matters.
Can
And
I
I think
piggyback
everybody
on
should
that?
know that, you know,
Can I piggyback?
one, I think things should be addressed because you should not be working that hard.
Right.
I don't think people should be working that hard. Like, if there's something in your system that hasn't been addressed, it needs to be addressed, you know. And also, all of the deprecation, the like putting yourself down for things. I speak for myself, is also a waste of energy because it doesn't have anything to do with you.
I want to piggyback on what you're saying, um, and tie into one of the questions. So Jeff S. has said, once you've been diagnosed, how do you communicate the issues to the family so they can support, or do we even try? And I feel like that question hits straight on to the spirit of this group, right? Which is, we are learning individual, we are learning with our team what is going on with us, and then communicating to the loved ones or anybody who's affected in partnerships or employer or whatever. This is part of what's happening to me, just like what Michelle was describing. So the more that we're learning, something like hangry, one of the other effects of having a lot of tabs open and being, smaller amount of energy resources, that people are quite irritable. They make impulsive decisions. They get lost. They even say harmful things because the system is starting. She's breaking up, Captain. It's starting to melt down, right? And to be able to say, uh-oh, I need to do this, or to loved one, hey, I'm starting to overheat here, and it not be a thing. It just be matter of fact. Just like if I had diabetes and I noticed my sugar was going up, I would say, this is what's happening. I need to take care of it. And boom, we're done. We're not having the what's wrong with you and you should have blah, blah, blah. It's just, I have to take care of this.
Well, and we recognize external stress, right? You
Mm-hmm.
in external stress all day, like people yelling at you or like things blowing up around you, people would go, oh yeah, I can see that you've been stressed. I can see why you're having a response, right? They just can't see the internal stress, but it's the same thing happening. So, and one of the things that I found to be helpful and may be helpful um, for people in this group too, if it makes sense, is I had someone come in with their partner,
Yeah,
done an assessment,
that's a
and
good.
then they came in with their partner, and their partner sat, and I said, okay, we're going to be going through some stuff now. And I sort of talked about, and they could see it, I mean, it's not hidden, like the responses are there. And then to say, this is how this impacts things. And the partner was like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, now I see it. Right. I've had parents come in whose kids I've done, and then I've assessed them. And then stuff comes up, right? And, and then they're like, oh, that makes sense, right? And so that's one thing that can be done, right? If we're doing a session, somebody else can come in and be a part of it. Um, I'm also happy to talk to people. Like, I can always write something up, but I don't know that that's always the most effective way. Because, one, I don't know that people, it depends on the way that people are receptive to information, right? If someone's frustrated and they're going to read something and be like, I don't know, whatever, right? But if you can have a conversation with someone, I think it matters.
I'm gonna take this as a natural break in sort of this part of our program, and I'm gonna stop the recording and then really open up the mics for us to have conversation. And so you can either type a question or, let's have a conversation with Michelle. And at least for this part, to be continued, so much to learn. Thank you for this. For this, I'm going to close this part of it and stop the recording, but I want to say thank you.